And we are good. We're recording right now.
Okay. Oh, Michael.
It's a little bit
Good.
like unnatural. We're like talking beforehand and now we're recording. So I guess just as an introduction. So Michael Wan here, and on the other end.
Yep. And Howdie Mickoski over at Howdie Mickoski Talks. And yeah, we're finally getting together to talk on camera.
Definitely so. And maybe a little bit of an introduction from my end. I reached out to Howdie maybe about a month ago, 6 weeks ago. I have been a fan of his research. I've been very inspired by what he has to share to kind of go down my own paths. And I reached out and was like, hey, maybe we can talk sometime. And those conversations have led to where we are right now. And we have some basic ideas of what we want to talk about, but the real excitement, I guess, is to see what naturally unfolds.
Yeah, and thanks. I knew a little bit about Michael, not a lot when he first sent me a hi by email, and when I went and checked his site, Susquehanna Alchemy, I found his research outstanding, and outstanding in that he's taking so many varied sources, so many varied things, showing how all of those jigsaw pieces fit together. So. Yeah, I was really impressed with some of his stuff, and we'll see where some of that takes us. We can talk about also baseball and a few other things that come up, some sports stuff and origins. But I thought, it's still a challenging thing because there's still those of us out there studying this kind of history. We're studying historical lies is the best way you can describe it. We're studying the lie of history. And yet we're living a lie at the current moment. Like we're actually in a lie. We're living it. It's not history now, we're in it. And so it's also this sense of how is the study of the past currently at the moment useful for where we are now? This kind of stuff is potentially always valuable to just move out of your past, but when nothing happening, when it's August 1939 and you live in Poland, you've got to really make some good decisions on how you're going to spend your time. So hopefully this conversation is not just something that's going to be interesting kind of for you, that there's going to be hopefully something of value that comes from what we discussed today for right now, that hopefully our talking of the past will somehow be useful for all of us now.
That I agree with that, and that's always like, when I share this stuff, I can go really out there with ideas, but at the end of the day, I'm very, very practical. I'm like, well, what's the benefit of this? The whole mental masturbation thing is not appealing to me. But at the same time, there's something that comes from ideas which are unpredictable, I suppose. And a lot of like what I think is, well, there are two things which I want to share, I guess, before we actually three things. When you said sports, I was like, do all the other stuff. I want to go and talk about into the deeper stuff of the sports, but maybe we'll get to that. The one is even the lies. This is both been my experience and then my perspective, and they're one and the same. But even anything that is in existence in the matrix, like if you squeeze it hard enough, you're going to get truth out of it. You're going to get something of value out of it if you know how to to approach it from the right perspective, because it can't be outside of it. It could be an inversion, it could be something else, but the fact that it exists, even if we're in a lie, we can still if you are mentally not in that prison, you can find a truth, whatever that truth may be. And then secondly, as it relates to recognizing 1939 Poland, that's a really interesting, that's an interesting metaphor for where we are right now. And I think about that as a lot. But again, this is Mike's perspective, and Mike will push the envelope. There is a fundamental change. And I've been doing this in a lot of some of my other research of what the experience is. Like, I know you talk a lot about maybe some of the more spiritual sort of stuff, and we talk about that. as an abstract sometimes, but I'm like thinking like the way things are unfolding right now, like this makes the most amount of sense, both in my experience and then what my anticipation is like we're not stuck in the Poland. Like the Poland 1939 is also part of like the lie. It's like if you now is the time for us to discover other ways of being, which quite literally open up that window as the door shuts. Like it's not like, oh, you've been trapped. Like, you know, oh, this whole thing has just been like, I can't believe this. Like, no, it's to bring us to this point. And I don't know what that transition looks like when we move over, but I'm looking for it, and I'm hopefully anticipating. Like there's that weird line between like, you know, like believing like something which a fallacy, and I don't want to fall under that, but I also want to have like be very clear as to what I think is the potentiality of the human experience.
Well, let's start where we began and let's see where we go.
All right, my friend.
So I thought we would start today with two pieces of World's Fair information. So probably anyone who's seen me and probably seen you knows a lot of the stuff about the strange world expositions that we've had between 1850 and 1915. But I came across, or not came across, really thought about two interesting pieces of these just tidbits, but they're a good starting point. One is from the 1904 St. Louis Fair. And of course, St. Louis, before the fair, would have been known mainly for its great site of Cahokia, right? The giant pyramidal site that's in East St. Louis. What I even didn't mention in the book, what I wrote, I didn't know about it, was that the exact site where that they chose for the St. Louis Fair had about 20 or 30 mounds on it. There was another city equal to Cahokia on the other side of the on the other side of the river in St. Louis. And so the story goes, in a sense, bulldozed all those mounds, just tore them down to build the fair. And the link I got was talking about 16 or 20 mounds. There's one famous one known as, I think it was Big Mound or Giant Mound or something, but all of these mounds are huge. So again, just the work involved to level 16 or 20 smaller pyramids on that's one massive amount of work. Never mind all the other landscaping and things they had to do and supposedly building this fair. And why did they want that site? Why did they want to destroy what would have been a very large ancient historical marker, similar to Cahokia, and kind of erase it from history with the fair? So again, you're wondering, did they level all the buildings? Are some of the buildings part of the old city? It's almost like there's this little clue being drifted in there that what are we looking at with this site? So that's the first one I brought up.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Of course you can.
When you say the mounds were huge, like what's huge? What's like a huge mound?
Okay, I have I have the site up here, or the article up. I think I can go and see if they'll give me any things for it. I happened to read recently. It's on OurStLouisHistory.com, and the article's called St. Louis Mounds. And it says in Forest Park alone, 16 mounds were destroyed in preparation for the 1904 World's Fair. And I'm just going to see if we get, now the largest mound, I don't know if this was specifically.
Let me interrupt for 1 second. You can screen share. So if you want to go down to the bottom and hit share screen, then that will pull up and we can all see what you're looking at.
Okay, so share screen. There we go.
There we go. Excellent.
Yeah, so you've got this site, Our Native American History, St. Louis Mounds, and they're here in the background. But when you get down to some actual photographs, they have actual photographs of these mounds that were destroyed. And this was the largest, though, it was known as Big Mound, about the size of a football field and 34 feet high. It was the largest and northernmost of the 25 mounds downtown.
So the size of a football field, so that would be 100 yards by however
Yep.
wide, like 50 and 35 feet high. Okay, the northernmost
Yeah.
of the 25. All right. Can you go back to the top, the first image we saw at the top where you could
Yep.
see the city in the background?
Oh yeah. There you go.
So at the 3 o'clock position, is that a mound or do you think
Yeah.
that's a hill?
I'm assuming this is probably this big mound thing that they're talking about. And then these other mounds, because I think I think the exposition was a little bit beyond them. So it's like one mound was kind of apart from these mounds that were supposedly destroyed. I think this big mound, if I remember, was taken down in the 1960s or the 1970s, but there should have been others in the background, but it's hard to tell. You see in the background, it kind of looks like hills,
Yes.
but are those actually hills? I haven't been to St. Louis, so I don't know if those are hills or if those are mounds.
Okay. And so what we're looking at right now, what we're looking at is just like a website of St. Louis mounds, but this is not specifically related to the 1904 exposition, correct?
No, this was just a
So
site
we're
of just
cross
talking about
referencing.
the
I
mounds.
just want to make certain what we're looking at because
What we're looking at,
and,
yeah, yeah. It's just
so
a site about these mounds, and that these mounds, that there was that everyone knows about Cahokia, but they kind of that this site is a historical site of St. Louis, and they're just trying to discuss that there were these. There's a sort of like a second city on the other side of the
is
river.
could you pull up like a Google map and show us where
Hmm.
the site was, where the old mounds were versus the new mounds, and what is still in existence versus
Let's see if they have
versus.
a map on here first, just
Oh, do they have a map
briefly.
on here? Okay,
I don't know. There's a
the map
marker
on
where
here. Okay,
where it was here, the Mound Street marker, but we don't have. This boulder stands near the site of the Great Indian Mound, leveled
I
about
voted in
1870.
1870.
Yeah, which gave this to the city of St. Louis the name Mound City.
Wow.
Okay, so that's where the little stone is that describes it, but they don't have a map. Okay, so let's see if we can. I gotta find.
If you just type in St. Louis, if you just you're
Yeah,
gonna get. Yeah, there
I'll
you
just
go.
take it in here, and we'll just go into Missouri, into St. Louis.
Have
Now
you
we
ever been
know
to
it's.
St. Louis?
I have not.
I've spent
No.
very little time in the Midwest as well. I did take a trip 2 years ago to the Serpent Mound in Ohio,
Oh,
and that was I'm into I got this fantastic book. I can't remember the name of the author. I heard him on the Higher Side Chats, and he
okay.
created this thing called the North American Encyclopedia of Mounds. And it basically is a list of where all the mounds are, which ones you can get to, which ones you can't get to. And whenever I travel, I try to use that. Like, I'm going to go and find a mound. And the guy writes in a decent amount of history of like what we know about the mounds and their uses are. And
Right.
I learned a lot. Like, I thought I knew about mounds before him. I learned a lot about it. But nonetheless, like, this is, I want to see this from both, like, personal experience. Like, I want to go to this. I've always wanted to go to St. Louis. And then I want to see how these all relate, because what I'm finding very interesting, what you're hinting at is like, why did they choose to demolish one set of mounds while keeping the other?
Right.
And they're on the two sides of the Mississippi, correct?
Exactly.
And so
And
that
just
that
and
I
just
think,
and just as I thought about this, because you were talking about the mound. Sorry, I don't want to lose this piece of it here.
go with it.
There's the where the there. This is where the exposition was. Um, was I don't know if you're aware or not, but because I haven't been to the Serpent Mound in Ohio. Really wanted to, but the Serpent Mound in Ohio almost exactly mirrors the site of Avebury in England.
I have never heard that.
Right. That most people just think of Avebury as one circle, one giant stone circle in the middle, but it actually has the same as the Serpent Mound, two segments of stones, large aisleways of stones that lead up to it that work the same thing as a serpent winding in to where the serpent's mouth opens up to, eat an egg. So it's exactly the same as the Serpent Mound. It's just most people only think of Avebury as the stones.
So Avery has the earth mounding in addition to the standing stones. Is that what you're
Sorry,
saying?
let's
Or the
just.
stones are in the line, which is similar to what we see with the Serpent Mound?
Yeah, it's almost exactly the same as the Serpent Mound. I'll just quickly, since we're talking about, see if we can find a photograph of
Ah,
the whole thing. But like this is the central circle of stones in Avebury, and the stones are
okay.
giant. But if you look, I think it's to this direction. It's hard to see, but they run literally into the landscape for long stretches, and it has quite a similarity then in the layout to Serpent Mound. I'm just hopeful there'll be a complete map of it. Yes, there's a little bit better. No, that's just the inner circle that doesn't have the lead up stones to it.
Well, nonetheless, we could go. I want to see where you. I didn't mean to take you
Yeah,
off too much off
yeah,
of
no.
topic because I'm very
Anyway,
curious to see where. So, can you zoom out so I can see where that is relative to? So that is
because
west
here's
of.
Cahokia. Yeah, here's Cahokia here,
Okay.
and then this would be around the area where the fair was.
Okay. The fair is not where the red dot or where your red marker is.
No, the red marker. I don't know what
Let's
the
see.
red marker is. That was
Close.
it was a little bit off. It's a little bit beside the red marker, so it's a
All
little
right.
bit. It's kind of in here.
So then the next question is where the Mound City was, which was demolished. Do we know where that is?
No, all it said is that they were demolished to build the fair. So I would
So
have to assume that it was at this location.
can on the website which we were looking at before, were we looking at like the history of
Oh,
St. Louis?
they did have this map.
They have that map, but they also had, where did they have the picture of the Rock Memorial? Like it was right by a highway. You could see a highway
Yeah,
in the
and
background.
that's like one. Here's a sort of a drawing of it. You can see the size of the thing.
Yeah.
And of course that's all that's left of it. And yeah, it looks like it's right next to so I think this big mound was kind of closer to the river, and these other mounds were at a different location.
So,
This is obviously well,
well,
I
I
don't know if it's
wonder if
the
you go
river.
into Google Maps and you type in what is that called? Mound
What is it
Marker
called?
St.
Let's look at
Louis.
it. It's called Mound Street
Yeah, Mound
Marker.
Street Marker. Like that may be a place in uh
Let's see.
yeah,
Mound. Mound. Well, there's Mound Street. Let's see if Mound Street shows up. Okay.
and
Yeah. And
that
there it
looks
is.
like there we
Big
go.
Mound Monument.
All right, so let's go zoom out. Let's go see where this is relative to everything else.
So this one is right next. So that one is right next to the river. There's the arch, the famous arch of
Wow,
St.
so it's
Louis, right?
right next to the arch.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
where
Let's zoom
is
out again. And so we're talking. I think this would be the Jackson Park site of the fair, and there's Cahokia down here.
that looks like a perfect equilateral triangle to me, I'll tell you what. So if you right click on Google Maps, you can get the measure distance.
Okay, so you want me to go from where to where?
So I'm just curious, if so you double click or right click, yeah, you see, oh, look at that.
Why am I in Norsk?
So the bottom one is probably distance, right?
Yeah.
And then so now do a second click, and you're going to get the 2 points, and then you move the points. Okay, so you got one there, and you move it there.
And so roughly to let's say the middle of Cahokia is about there, let's say. Okay.
So just about like 6
miles.
6 miles.
Almost 7 miles or almost 11 kilometers.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm just trying to. So that is.
And then this is Jackson Park, and that way would be, it looks like 20 kilometers this way, 12 miles. So a little bit longer that way. So it's yeah.
It would be interesting, like if like historically, if like even it looks like where the archway would be, like would make sense, is where the epicenter might be, like an epicenter.
Right.
And then there's some sort of shape which is formed, around the other mounds.
There's
I mean, look
at
like it's almost kind of like it's comical, right? If you think about like probably the significance of this location, like it almost in the way of like the final scene in Planet of the Apes, where you see the Statue of Liberty, like with just like underneath all of that. So all we have left of whatever this mound may be, and like we could let that just sit like in the imagination, but we have a sense like there's significance. It's significant enough that this is where they built the friggin' archway. And then like, here you go, you get this. You get this
That's
rock,
all that's left. Yeah.
and it's like right underneath, like, you know, probably a homeless shelter. Like, you know, or like right underneath there, all of the so it's
look what's around it. Just yeah.
like literally the worst things we could, maybe not the quite worst, but at least like, you know, aesthetically and just like the human experience, like just like absolutely devoid of beauty, harmony, and life.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to wonder, they've put benches here, but I mean, who's going to walk here to look at this? I mean, who's actually coming all this way? Just, you know, there's like, it's in the middle, you know, like they could have made this a much more special site.
Yeah. All right. So,
But that's
okay. So I took you off a little bit. I want you to finish going on. Like now I can see, like for me, it's really, really helpful to see things and to really, you know, understand where they are in three-dimensional reality to one another. And then like, you know, a story begins to unfold. So you were talking about some other stuff.
Yeah, well, here's St. Louis University at the same time. We've got, I mean, look, you can see these buildings. You can see the beauty of these buildings right here.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I guarantee are not just random. If we just go on the street just for fun, since we're talking
there
about St. Louis,
there is like a, not like Ivy League elite, but I know there's a school in St. Louis. I don't think it's St. Louis University, which is considered like their,
you know, there we go.
What is the school in St. Louis? I'd be curious to see that. There's a college there, which I know.
There's St. Francis Xavier College Church. No. Pius Memorial Library.
I think it might be Washington. Is it called Washington University? Is that?
Oh yes, and they actually, I think, had a building that was also built from the fair. I don't remember if I don't have my whole Louis Fair on top of my head, but
that is like and look at like, so I can just see like the way the street is. Everything comes out of this general area. It fans out. You could see their street panning right there.
Bring it up a little bit more. There you go. Yeah.
All right, we could see that. How big? I wonder how big St. Louis is as a city. I would say it's probably like a 1 million population city for the metropolitan statistical area. That's got it. Is that the airport?
Yeah, that's the airport is out here. Yeah.
All right.
Right. I was just looking for Washington University. I think you're right. I think that was. I do remember also another university being in.
Go type in Washington University in the search bar for Google Map, and I'll pull it right up.
Let's just see first if Washington. Oh yeah, there is Washington University.
Yeah, and it's
okay. So,
and I'm pretty certain it's like you know, quote unquote a top school. It falls underneath
Washington University, St. Louis.
See where we are.
So there. Let's zoom out, and we are right next to where the fair was. Yeah.
There we go.
And if I remember, one of these buildings is one of the fair buildings. That they still have one of the few buildings left, and I don't remember which building offhand it is, but we're talking right next to it. So I would almost assume it would probably be something close to the fair itself, but I don't see anything that looks like an ancient building here.
Yeah, like I definitely could get pulled down on the colleges. They always get my attention. There's probably something there, but okay. So we're seeing this World Fair, and it's regardless of how we think of like St. Louis as a world-class city like New York City or something, which, you know, everyone knows. St. Louis is really, really significant as it's what it represents, crossing with the arch and crossing the Mississippi, and, you know, Anheuser-Busch, right? That's pretty much like, I don't know what other big, I think these are other clues, or at least I look at them as clues as to understanding the quality of of the modern city on the land is by looking at like what are their biggest energy generators, and that's usually, you know, best seen by like measured in dollars. So I think Anheuser-Busch and all that, like, you know, what that represents,
Right.
that's there.
That's there, and you know, and it's for the Midwest, it was kind of along with Chicago, it was the Mecca on the way to fully out west. You know, this was the dividing point before you hit Indian territory. It was really Chicago and St. Louis. After that, you were in the wild.
So the fair here was, you said 1904, correct?
1904.
Typically, what's the amount of time? Were there expositions and fairs which would happen simultaneously?
Generally, no. So there, 1904 though might have had a number. There's these things that you know as world fairs, which are sort of one per year generally, or one every couple of years, and then there would be sort of, they're also called world fairs, but they're like minor fairs, and you might have 40 of them all over the world in a particular year.
Okay, so it's not like the Olympics and the fact that there's a very structured every 4 years sort of thing.
No, of course, St. Louis also had the Olympics that year.
They had the Olympics out there as well.
So the 1904 Olympics were also with the St. Louis World's Fair.
When did the modern games begin? Like I thought it was
1896.
So then this would have been the third Olympics?
The third Olympics, yeah.
And do you know where the first one I think was in Athens, right?
First one's in Athens. I don't remember where 1900 was. I know there was a problem because in 1904 the Olympics were supposed to be somewhere else, and St. Louis refused to hold the World's Fair unless they got the Olympics too.
Serious.
All right. I can verify that. I'll go into my book because that's what I wrote. Let me check it. If it's in my book, it's probably correct. At the same time, the Olympic Games were originally awarded to Chicago. What happened is St. Louis threatened to hold its own Olympics, and so they relocated the games.
I'm trying to, you would think this would be an easy thing to discover. I'm looking for a list of Olympic game. Here we go. The cities. So 1896 was Athens, then Paris, then St. Louis. So think about that, like in terms of like the caliber and the quality of the energy of the cities. Like we know Paris, we know London, and sandwiched in between them was St. Louis, which I think is indicative, regardless of it being like for bargaining power. They won, they got it, they were listened to. So I think that is further that further plays upon kind of where we're getting at. Like there's something there, and I think the clearest indicator is the mounds. Well, when was it called the harmonic resonance, the harmonic whatever? That thing that happened, I think was the 1980s. God, what was it called? It was on the mound. Do you know what I'm referring to?
No.
All right.
But I'll look at the camera as if I pretend like I do.
Okay, so I can't think of what's called. So it's how do I spell? What's the big mound which is still in existence?
You mean the site, Cahokia?
Yeah. How do I spell that?
It's down here. Cahokia.
Okay. I'm so bad with like names. It's a wonder I could even speak.
And that you can put Susquehanna in your
exactly.
Your videos, yeah.
So the Harmonic Convergence. So that took place August 17th, 1987.
Okay.
You're not familiar with that?
No.
So this was let's see if they give a quick it was this worldwide kind of like new age ritual sort of thing that took place there. I think they had like 10,000 people on top of it.
Okay.
So let me see if I can.
In 1987.
In 1987. So what I'm curious about is, okay, here's the Harmonic Convergence. The Harmonic Convergence is the name given to the world's first synchronized global peace meditation, which occurred August 16th through 17th, 1987. The event also closely coincided with an exceptional alignment between planets in the solar system. So Jose Argula, I don't ever know how to pronounce his name either. He's the guy who's behind like the 13 moons. Like he reintroduced a lot of the Mayan calendar to like the modern world. So I believe he was like the person who was behind it. But the power center. So an important part of the harmonic convergence observances was the idea of congregating at power centers. And the power centers were like Mount Shasta, Mount Fuji, Mount Yamasuka, and obviously the mound in St. Louis. So I think there were like 5 or 6. This isn't showing me like a full list of all of the places, but I know
that's interesting. They weren't nothing in Egypt. Nothing in Mexico. And there's it makes you see where the Cahokia mounds exactly are, because they are. Oh, that's really interesting. Because the city name Cahokia is here. That's right. But if you look, so when we were doing these lines earlier, anybody who lives in St. Louis would have seen instantly we're in the wrong location. The Cahokia mounds are up here.
Yeah, more of the northeast of the city.
Yeah. So that means if we were taking sort of a line, sorry, we'll get back to what you're saying in a second.
No,
but
go with the line, yeah.
It probably runs pretty close to, if we just take this, I'll just draw a line, kind of just.
You got to do a second click to get another dot.
Yeah, I just got to find where we need the second click.
Oh, okay.
I want to get it. There it is at Forest. Oops.
Forest
Park.
Here?
Yeah. No. But anyway, Forest Park, and we can see just from Cahokia. So here we go. There's our line, and that's running very, very close to Big Mound, because the Big Mound was in here somewhere, right?
Can you draw that line, please?
Yeah. Let's see if I can. He's asking me to do all sorts of. Okay, so there's Cahokia. And then I just have to click another location, right?
You just need to click and then you can move the dot.
There it is.
There it is.
So there's your line.
Let's see where that, if you zoom in, like as it goes over the river, let's see what it goes over. All right. So it hits the Route 70 bridge.
Hits the Route 70 bridge.
Where's the
Stan
arch?
Musial Bridge? The arch should be down a little further, I think.
Stan Musial Bridge. So there's one of our baseball ascended masters.
Yeah. There's Gateway Arch is here.
It must be.
Yeah, because it says it's there. So it's a little bit south, and that mound that we looked at, wasn't that right around here?
That was right by Smokey O's Barbecue. It was right up. It was right by one of the bridges. So see where you see riverfront.
This one here. It's definitely this bridge here. It's this, and it was just north. I'm wondering right in here. If we can put this in again, this was called Big Mound. Big Mound Monument. There it is. So Big Mound Monument is like about a few hundred yards from this line.
Yeah. And probably if you were to go and tweak where you put either one of the endpoints.
Yeah.
You know, if you like made the
right,
one.
I just went in the middle of this. If we actually put this probably onto a key pyramid, or I know there's a thing called Woodhenge, right? Which is like a wooden Stonehenge out of Cahokia.
Undoubtedly.
Yeah, we would have had a much different. But we're close.
And again, like just because the mound marker is like where they decided to put that concrete memorial, like that also has some play. So, I mean, I think we could say pretty clearly, can you pull out a little bit so we can see the endpoints again? Or you could minimize the.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
So, okay. So how far
there's
is
your one? It says 19 kilometers.
19 kilometers. And then where is Big Mound relative? If you zoom in, we could see like where the midpoint is, or like where where that bisector is. I'm just curious what so that's
So a
10 and a
little bit
half.
over half, 19, because this would be about half here. So just about halfway.
Okay. So 10 and a half on that. Okay. All right.
But of course, if I did this, because I just did the middle of Jackson Park, if I had maybe done this a little bit further, right, to
Yeah.
a little bit past that, or into the fair a little bit more, make it 20 kilometers, and now this will be at almost the midpoint.
Yeah. Yep.
And the arch would all, of course, because it's at about the same thing, right? It's about the same key thing. So again, we have to wonder what you would find if you started bisecting this line further, like outside of St. Louis. Like if you just, for fun, people at home, take the line between Big Mound and the arch, and then take it north and south and see what you hit.
Yeah, there's I'm still kind of like smitten with the idea of that being Stan Musial Bridge, right?
Right.
Like typically when you go to a big city and you see like I'm assuming that's a pretty significant bridge. It's Route 70, like anything that's going to cross the Mississippi. In Philadelphia, it's the Ben Franklin Bridge. Well, I guess,
Right.
it can vary. Rarely are you going to get like a sports figure. Like maybe, I mean, I guess it has happened, but I still think that's interesting, particularly where I'm hoping maybe we can switch gears. I want to go and do a comparison right now to how this shows, like, I think that all we've done right now is we've identified that there's probably something more here, and we can ascertain that this alignment is probably significant. And particularly if you scroll back, and we could widen it, we can see this is at a pretty significant bow of the river. Like, I mean, the river's always bowing and going, but this is like right at a bow point, right? For whatever that may mean. So,
right. Well, at least we know that the natives had chosen to build here, here, here. This is the area that cities were chosen. So they're not choosing it at random. They're making energetic choices.
correct. And like, and we may not quite fully understand like the logic for why sites were chosen, but I think what we can say with comfort is like there was probably a lot like there was a logic, there was a reason, it wasn't just random.
Right.
So we go and certainly we could go deeper here, but I want to go and compare now to Jamestown. Jamestown was 1907, right?
Right. Do you want to go into that one, since you're talking about Jamestown? You can do your
Yeah.
screen.
So
sharing mine.
Well, I want to, yeah. So I will, let's stop your screen share. And so I want to go with this, I want to go with exactly what we just identified. And then I'm just going to do a comparison, because I think this in itself is I don't know, it's getting me excited right now. So let me go and.
So yeah, so like, for example, Jamestown would not be classified as a World's Fair. The United States only had ones in Philadelphia, Chicago, Buffalo, St. Louis, San Francisco, but they had these other, and again, I don't know the exact name for them, but these are the ones that you would find in Omaha, in Portland, in Nashville, in Jamestown, and they had all of these sort of, they're classified as world expositions, but they're not. They don't have this somehow certain special status. So just so people know, we're looking at a fair, but not one of these special status fairs.
Can you name some of those other cities that fall under the not special status? You said Omaha.
Yeah, Omaha, like that's
Omaha's a legit city, right? Like Omaha's a big city. Like it's not New York, but
they had 2 million visitors come in 1898. Where do 2 million people show up from to come to Omaha, Nebraska?
And like, the story we're told of history, like Omaha was part of like like it was between, like, let's say Chicago and Denver or something, like, that's
right.
that was one of the population centers. And we can see that, like, the banks that came out of there and what were some of the others? So Omaha
had one, like Portland had one.
Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Oregon.
Okay. So a legit city.
Yeah, Jamestown was another one.
Jamestown ain't no legit city. That's where I'm trying to
No,
go with this. So
yeah.
Jamestown is
Let's
different than
let me see. Because there were so many of these smaller ones too. Like for example, like New Orleans had like the cotton exposition for 2 or 3 years. So how do you classify that? Louisville, Kentucky had one for 2 or 3 years in the 1880s. But when it comes to, like, if I look up a list on here of World's Fairs, there's because, and I wish I could remember the way of how I had to look this up, because there's one that has the main World's Fairs, and then there's one that has uh, all of them. And I might be, you go ahead and talk. I'm going to see if I can find this.
All right. So where I want to go with, or at least what I want to like, I don't want to go too deep in this, but I'm finding this interesting right now in terms of this comparison. Like there's a lot of clues as to, I don't think cities happen by random. I don't think that history happens by random, that this stuff is coming up for a variety of different reasons. And when we first started this discussion a couple of weeks ago in email, we said, like, let's look at Jamestown. And the reason why we want to look at Jamestown is because that was a nexus point. We both have done some research at Jamestown, coming at it from different reasons. And now putting in context, like all of these like secondary fairs, whether it's like the Cotton Expo or whatever they call it. The one thing which I do want to indicate is all of those places were still cities. They were still cities. Jamestown was not a city. Jamestown is something else. Now,
Okay, I've got the ones just for the United States while you're going through, just so you can hear where these other ones were around the same time frame. So this is from 1900. So the other ones that were sort of minor World's Fairs in the US, New York, Toledo, Portland, New York again, Hampton Roads, Jamestown, another one in Chicago, New York City again, Seattle, New York City. Those are the others from that 10-year time frame.
So the actual location of Jamestown was completely, to my understanding, that was I don't want to say in ruins, but it was before it became like what it is today, Colonial Williamsburg and stuff like that. So they held it was chosen primarily because of the significance of Jamestown. And like you could read the Wikipedia history. I mean, I tend to follow this sort of understanding. There's always like a really good story, and then there's the real story. But for nonetheless, like Jamestown was selected. And one of the reasons why Jamestown was selected is because of its symbolic importance in both the establishment of the British Empire and the establishment of the United States. Like this was a nexus point. This was the first permanent colony, like outside of like the British Isles, I think, or maybe it was something like I've read somewhere. I don't remember specifically why the Jamestown significant colony was so significant. And then we also know it was from that colony system, beginning with Jamestown, in which the colonies within which would eventually become the United States. So this is where it begins. And we like that. And we initially, like we talked, so the Jamestown Expo happened on the 300th anniversary of the establishment of Jamestown, the settlement, which was 1607. And when you go into the history of Jamestown and I guess really the Jamestown settlement, we're going to come across the mythology of Pocahontas. Like this is where the Pocahontas story is. And I don't necessarily want to go down that path too much because there's another place I want to go where I'm taking this more along the mound sites. But we know that story is very, very important. And within the Jamestown Expo, like Pocahontas was the most important symbol of the city. Like the primary boulevard within the Jamestown Exposition was called the Pocahontas Boulevard. There was this really magnificent statue of her, like in the center of the gardens. Like, that's really significant. But this is where I want to go. And this is like, I wasn't planning this, but I just got like, I got real excited after what you just showed me. So So let's go right here.
Okay.
This here is the, this is called the John Smith map of Virginia. And so the Pocahontas story is like supposedly how Pocahontas like saved John Smith from being killed. And then, you know, she's the rest is Disney. So, but this map, this is the actual, like where that mythology begins. This map is accredited to 1607. It was released in 1612. Excuse me. My research shows that it goes directly through the hands of Francis Bacon. And what we see in this map, and where I want to go with all of this, is it points to a specific location. And this location, which I'm going to show you, it lines up exactly with what we just discovered in St. Louis, and it has to do with mound sites. And this is why I was asking you in the beginning, like how big is this mound? So first, I'm going to go and tell you what the secret code is. So Francis Bacon and all of these guys are known for the art of steganography, hiding information in public documents. And so we'll begin this with a like a hypothesis. Right here is Chesapeake Bay. This is the Chesapeake Bay in how we see it now in our modern satellite imagery. This is south right here. This is south right here. So this is a little bit confusing because the map is oriented with north on the right. But nonetheless, this is the history which we're told is they arrived right here on, I think it was like May 7th or 8th, right at this point. And then a couple of days later, they moved up to right here. Actually, right here is where Jamestown is. And at this thing called Sewell's Point is where the fair was held. But all of this is part of this much, much larger body of water, which here we call the Chesapeake Bay. But if you really know the truth of like the geology of it, the Chesapeake Bay is the Susquehanna River. You could see it just like goes and folds right here. We looked at the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River is the most significant active river in North America. This is the most significant historical river in North America. This is estimated to be close to 300, have been flowing continuously for 300 million years. You know, take your science, like however you want to take it, but this is what they're telling us, versus like the Mississippi, which has been flowing for like 70 million years. Again, put that in context with how you want to understand reality. But what we do know is age matters. You know, the oldest person in a clan has the most amount of wisdom. Typically, the oldest part of your experience has the most amount of influence in terms of like what and who you become. So we've got this river, this ancient river. This is where they were. This is where globalism begins. This is where the first computer is, right here where these guys meet. This is where the first three-wired electrical distribution is. All of this being said, on this map, let's see if I can make this a little bit more clear. We've got this mirrored 40, 39th parallel, 41st parallel, and we've got this mirrored 40. And we've got this drawing of this native, and it's a Susquehannock. This is kind of like this is when the name Susquehannock is given. John Smith writes about the Susquehannocks. Like everything else is referred to the native people as savages. Like that word savage and native person, they're like they're interchangeable throughout the book, which was called The General History of Virginia. However, when he gets to the Susquehannocks, there's like this 3 or 4 paragraphs where like the Susquehannocks are the greatest friggin' people I've ever met. Doesn't really explain why. But he's like, these guys are amazing, and they're all giants. They're all friggin' giants. And what's typically explained from a historical perspective is like, well, they weren't really giants. These guys, the English, they were like 5'4", and they came around these guys, and because they ate like a diet of fish all the time, they were like, they just seemed taller. And like I poke holes in that story immediately. I'm like, well, why wouldn't that be true with every other person who lived in North America? Like they've been eating the same diet. Why aren't they called giants? But nonetheless, so what it says underneath here, it says the Susquehannocks are a giant-like people, and thus attired. Take that for however
Right.
you want. But this is
Right.
where I want to go. This is where I want to go with all of this. There's a secret location, and the secret location, which it points to, is the 40th parallel. That's what this reverse 40 is pointing at. And then the Susquehanna River. This person right here is a double entendre. This is part of like how you hide things, is because there are different contexts. And so if most people are thinking of seeing or thinking about something in one context, if you mean another context, well, then it hides from them because their consciousness is telling them not to look that way. Susquehanna River, this is where we get the name Susquehanna River, the Susquehanna people. So we're going to go and look there. And what
Then
we
make
have,
sure you remind me. I want to talk to you about that image once you're done this.
this
I
image.
just don't want to forget. Yeah, there's a couple of things in that specific image of the Indian to bring up. Go ahead.
All right, let's do that. So right here, this is modern map. This is the Susquehanna River. This is exactly the 40th parallel right here. And what I showed, I did this like years ago. There is this alignment. There is this alignment here between what we find in the center and what we find here. This is Franklin and Marshall College. That's why I was asking you about colleges. This is named after Ben Franklin, 1787. This is York College. And right up here, we've got the Masonic Home and Elizabethtown College. All of these are in the location in this perfect alignment. When we look at this, let me go blow this up so you can see a little bit closer. This is called High Point Scenic Vista. That's right here. This is Franklin and Marshall. This is where you get the Freemasonic mortarboard cap. And you can see right here, this is York College, York, and all this sort of stuff. I've covered that ad nauseum in the past, but I want to just make certain I cover that because I want to. And this is what it looks like on the top of this place. It's a crescent moon and sun. Now I want to go and switch gears and show you what I've never talked about before and what I've always been curious about. It's called High Point. This is where I live, like in this general area. It's called High Point, and I've always asked myself, I'm like, is this a mound or is it a hill? Is it a mound? Is it a hill? And my sense is this is a mound. This is a mound, but I don't know enough. I haven't seen precedents. I don't I don't have certain scientific equipment to verify. But now, after what you just showed me within St. Louis, and I'm like, how big is this mound? Oh, it's the size of a football field. It's this tall, and I'm like putting that like in general context.
Okay.
And by the way, this location, this is where we have the first permanent Rosicrucian colony in the New World. All accessible to these places. Like you can get on like a boat and you can access them all. You don't have to necessarily walk through the wilderness, but they're all pointing to the same places. I'm going to pause now, and I want to hear your question or your observation as it relates to the drawing of the Susquehannock warrior. I'll bring it back up if you would like.
Okay, well, we can keep going with if you want to keep that train of thought. I just had two things about that warrior too.
All right, we'll bring that up because what I want to do is I want to pull up a map and kind of look at the area in the same way that we looked at St. Louis.
Okay, so while you're doing that, then I can ask you to bring up a couple things. Because I do remember watching that first video where you'd explain some of this, but I don't remember if you brought up two pieces of the attire of that native. One is the large bow that's being held in the right arm. The right hand is holding a bow without arrows. and I find that very interesting because I just did an interview on Crow Radio last week on the Mutus Liber, the alchemic document of the 1600s, and there's a key plate there, plate I think 13 or 14, that has the same image of a woman standing with an archery target. She's got a large bow, almost the same, that the height of her, it's not a small bow, it's like the size of her, but there's no arrows. So it's also very, very similar to show me that in itself is an alchemic message. Because normally you would, there's arrows, I guess, in a quiver behind her, I
There's
guess
a,
that's what
I
that's
think
supposed to
these,
be.
but it's hidden. These are the
It's
quick.
hidden. Yeah, the arrows are hidden, and in the Mutus Liber, there was no arrows to be seen at all, but the target was there, and the target relates very closely to, I think it was plate 3, which was a revelation of various worlds, worlds within worlds almost, or almost like a labyrinth journey. So that the bow and the arrow in the Mutus
Huh.
Liber seems to be related to an alchemic or labyrinth type journey. And then the second thing I noticed is now the animal that's behind the warrior, is that supposed to be a hare or a rabbit, or
I've always read that it is a fox,
that it's a fox?
but I don't know.
I don't know either. Because I'm just thinking, because one of the key elements in the Rennes le Chateau mystery of the particularly some of the paintings that you'll find at Rennes-les-Bains, they're all known as the paintings of the Christ hare, where Christ and the hare are mirrored in some way, are imaged in the paintings at the Church of Rennes-les-Bains, and that somehow Christ is seen as the hare, as the rabbit, that there's almost no difference. So if that's a rabbit, then that, again, you're indicating that's potentially same symbolic messaging. If it is a fox, it gets so hard to see from the image. If it's a
You can't
fox, of
tell,
course,
can you?
no, the fox has of course a lot of lore, particularly in Native Indian mythology as to it. But I just thought, to me, those are really, really important symbols that probably get missed. The bow itself, and again, if we saw the Mutus Liber, it would be the same image,
Well, that's a
except it's a woman.
yeah. Well, this is a woman. Like that's.
Okay. Oh, it is a woman. Yeah. Oh, so there you go. So it's the same. It's the same message.
This is
It's the same message.
undoubtedly a woman right here.
Feminine knowledge of, because by the end of the Mutus Liber, it's the women. The men are doing sort of the leading at the early parts of the plates. It's a book of non-worded plates, images. But by the end, the women have taken the lead in all of the plates.
So what you're saying about the bow is like, and looking at like the symbolism of the bow, that's really interesting and fascinating. I've like been kind of like I've pigeonholed my thinking into this bow because if you read into like a lot of like this, quote unquote standard techniques which were used in like the 1600s in steganography, usually in a pictogram, which is what this would fall under,
Right.
there is there's a character that like points to the key. And what I thought, and one of the reasons why I've made the conclusion that the warrior named Susquehanna and the river named Susquehanna, which is in mirror to what you have in what was Gaul or France, where you had the Susquehanna and the Susquehannie, and the Susquehanna, the river known as Susquehanna, which was very, very significant within the mainland Celt
Right.
culture. Like that's the Seine. It's the Seine. So we're seeing the same thing, and there's so many similarities between the Susquehanna and the Seine, or Susquehanna, whatever you want to see. So, but where I was going with this is the Susquehannocks. And then you could see right here, this is where you get the name, the Susquehanna flu. It says right down here. The river had like 100 different names when the English arrived. Like depending upon who you talk to, they had a different name for it. Like there were some people I do think called it the Susquehanna, but that was not universally accepted. But nonetheless,
Have you also, by the way, sorry, have you also checked the length of the bowstring? Because like you say, things that are placed in the document, and that's very, very key with like the Poussin painting of 1630, which the shepherd's staff was the marker, was the marker point of the entire geometric shapes that went into the painting, and was sort of the mathematical marker. So I'm wondering if the line itself is meant to be used to mark or show specific distances on the rest of the map.
So what, no, I have not. So if you were to do that, what would you do? Would you use that like length to go and see like what is from, like, start playing around to see what distance is from
Right.
from one of those points, and just kind of see what we have.
Yeah,
But
I would take that line, the line of, like, not the bow part. I would use the string because the string is straight.
right,
So I would use the string part of it, and then sort of just for fun. Okay, I'll take it from the bow top. I'll take it from the bow bottom. I'll take it from
right.
the eye.
Okay.
I'll take it for little things like that, just to see if it hits something that then matches your research as being a key point, or a point that you should say, I wonder why this could be a point being focused on. Yeah.
Well, and because I think there's so much, like, particularly for people who, like, want to, like, get into this at home. There's so much inside this map, and I'll show you one more thing which I found. Um, this right here, it's the Chesapeake Bay, and this is the Potomac. This is what Washington D.C. is off of, and you can go and see it. Like, kind of makes this general triangle. Can you see this triangle?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. This A, if you were to go back and connect the points from this point to that point and that point to that point, that's how you identify the center of any object. The A is directly in the center. So for whatever reason, we've got that right there. So we've got this A. And now if you were to go and identify this in contemporary reality, if you were to identify where this bow is or where the peak is on the river, this right here is known as Triangle, Virginia. All right, which in itself is like, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. But that to itself does not have any historical significance. Now I'm going to give you some historical significance. If you go and you see where Triangle, Virginia is in on a map, it's right next to Quantico, Virginia. It's the same spot. Do you know what Quantico is?
Yeah.
Quantico is like the training center of the FBI. And if you go and you do a little bit of history and research, well, before it was the FBI's training center, it was the OSS's training center. This was the original. So there are two primary places where the OSS trained. They trained right here, and they trained at Camp X in Toronto.
Okay.
So I find that fascinating, but I haven't even got, but yeah, I forgot where I was going to go with all this sort of stuff. But this warrior, oh, I want to say this one thing before we move off, or warrior, at least before I move off, to give you an opportunity to say anything else. The warrior, the bow rests right here, which this here is the Susquehanna River. And this here is where it is showing to begin or end, depending on how you want to look at it. But this is the headwaters, and this bow is resting right there, which to me, one of the ways which, and this is the beauty with the steganography, is it's multi-layered, and depending upon the creativity of the individual, both encoding it and then of the individual who is going to be decoding it. And keep in mind, Francis Bacon, he wrote about it. He said, it's a game of hide and seek. It is my joy to hide things so other people can find them in my works. But this here is the key, which is basically saying, like, this warrior is pointing to the beginning of the Susquehanna River, which is how, I was able to begin to go and say, like, okay, they're interchangeable. One is a symbol for the other because he's pointing right, or she's pointing right at the beginning of this river, which happens to be quite possibly the oldest flowing river on Earth, and all this other stuff. Any final words on the warrior before we go take a look at where this is on Google Map?
No, but I did notice again, just while you were talking, I looked at the knees of the warrior, and again, the knees seem to have been made to almost again have like animal faces in the knees, and that links to these paintings in the church at Rennes-les-Bains in southern France.
Tell me more about that, please. Because I certainly I've never looked at the knees once. I've looked at this 1,000 times, but my awareness didn't go there. So like now, so you're telling me like new ways to, giving me.
Yeah, like if I look at the left knee, maybe I may be thinking like you could almost have like a bird's beak in the middle of the knee with perhaps eyes there, and on the other side also kind of similar. You do get the 2 points where you may have eyes, done very simplistically, but It's just because I've looked at paintings like this from southern France for so long, and trying to question what is actually in Christ's knee in this painting. Is it really a rabbit? Is it something else? What's the point? It just, so my mind looks to sometimes the areas others just wouldn't think of looking, right? And that just, so I'm wondering if the knees are also giving a clue here.
Yeah. The other thing which you know what pops in my mind right now too, and again, this just like noticing, you know, just because we're spitballing, if you will. The way the warrior is holding the club reminds me of like a lot of times when you see, like, you know, particularly like at least in my mind, like 1950s baseball players like on deck, like waiting to, like, they're not swinging, like this very kind of casual, like ready to go up. And I'm bringing this up because we talked about the Stan Musial Bridge, and we have right here, this also is Cooperstown, New York. That's where this is pointing to. That's the location of this river that begins in Cooperstown.
Oh yeah, right. That's where Cooperstown is, right?
And so that's why, like, to me, like Cooperstown and baseball is so significant within particularly this part. But I want to go. I want to move on.
Move ahead.
I want to move ahead onto this. Onto where are we here? Where are we here? I gotta find it.
Yeah, just so the people at home know, we had absolutely no plan other than a couple of basic ideas in our head, and we just thought we would see what happened rather than try to plan anything out.
All right. So this here is that location I was just talking about. This is High Point Scenic Vista, where we saw that park. And like, I kind of am thinking of comparing this in a very general way to what we saw with that mound. Let's see if we can get an idea of the what's the word which describes, this is looking up at High Point. So this is the road, you're driving on this road, and then you could see how it's like up on top of this hill. And so I'm trying to show, like, when we're thinking about like the St. Louis, this is coming up like right here, and it's still, this is the highest point of the area. This area is quite literally known as, this is the Susquehannock area. This is those people called the Susquehannocks. This is exactly where they lived. This High Point Scenic Vista came into existence. The reason why there's a park there is they were going to, a real estate developer was going to go and build McMansions. You could see like these homes right here and here, and he was going to build them right here, but they found human remains. And because this is known native land, like eminent domain kicked in, and then this is what they turned into. In fact, prior to this, like it was an area, it was a spot of great local controversy, but during what ended up as just being this scenic vista, was there were plans on making it like a world-class museum of like Native American history. This is what it looks like on the top. Remember those benches you saw here? The benches.
Yeah, it's very similar, actually.
Yeah, exactly. It's very similar. That one I don't believe was a perfect circle, but we have this circle right here. It's all jacked up on Google. I like to make jokes that whenever we see this, it's because there's a rift in the time-space continuum. I don't know if that's the truth or not, but I certainly like to play with that as an idea. And you can see you have these 360-degree vistas. What we also have in this area is right down here. Let's see where it is. This is called Native Lands Park. And these are all said to be mounds. This is Native Lands Park is it's 2 miles away. It's 2 miles away. And when you go and you look at it, let's see if I can get into it. Really get me into it. Yeah. So this is Native Lands Park. This is all it is. It's just hills. But all of these, my sense is they're mounds. I've heard it talk that way. Um, I've never seen any proof. And whenever I see mounds, I've always seen them like kind of the smaller mounds, which were like obviously like, but this is like a large like area, maybe like 50, maybe 100 acres. And they're these like these very, very large mounds, which seem to be similar to what you're showing me in St. Louis. And we're seeing a very similar alignment in the fact that we have what I call like the invisible college of this perfect alignment, which is like equidistant. We find like high point, this mound site equidistant between what became Franklin and Marshall College and what became what's now known as York College, but it was York Academy. All connected to people of the American Philosophical Society, Ben Franklin, which was always known to be the American version of the Royal Society, which was always the Invisible College of Francis Bacon and the Rosicrucians. And so we're beginning to see like a very, very like similar modus operandi. This seems to be, this is my take. This is my take that Philadelphia and this area that we see right here are almost like a symbolic representation of the tabernacle of the Bible, where we have like the inner, where we have like the, you could see this right here. This is the Chesapeake Bay. It comes in here and then it shoots out right here. This becomes the Susquehanna River. Then we have the Delaware Bay and then it shoots out opposite. This almost makes like an hourglass shape, you know, a chalice, if you will. This is Philadelphia. This is right on the 40th parallel on a straight line right here. This is the 40th parallel high point. The Rosicrucians, they came right here. They established, was known as the Society of the Woman in the Wilderness, Kelpius's cave. They went there. That was temporary. And then they moved all the way over here to Ephrata Cloister and they filmed, or they established the first Ephrata or the first Rosicrucian colony. This is the location right here in the map, in the Jamestown map, which we find right down here. This High Point literally opened up. It became open to the public on the exact 400th anniversary of Jamestown, of the founding of Jamestown, May 12th, 1607 and 2007. We had the Jamestown Exposition, which happened in 1907. At the 400th one down here, Queen Elizabeth was here, Queen Elizabeth II. The Bushes were here. It's a little bit different play on Anheuser-Busch, but there are connections to it. And we're beginning to see like the same motifs and they're showing up over and over again. If you're familiar with Ross Ben's research, and he's always talking about mystic Philadelphia, this is where I want to go with it. Philadelphia is the outer chamber, and this is like the Holy of Holies, the inner one. This is why this hasn't really, no one knows about it. This is why this hasn't really been like developed in the way. I don't necessarily think that was part of like a specific plan as much as like this is just how the cookie crumbled. But this is the way how I see this story and your work, and particularly what we just uncovered with the mound alignment and the significance of the mounds and how things alignment. These are all kind of like clues and cues to like this other history, this history which is like hiding beneath the surface, and this history which we can ascertain and begin to intuit, whether going there physically, if you're lucky enough to like live in a place where you have that, or even just exploring through, you know, the beast's Google Earth, like we can get to it. Any thoughts?
Not so much necessarily. I got the sense that the second place you showed me, the native native lands, that those may have been mounds. What I got the sense of where High Point is, I got the sense that that might be a hill of some kind, but I also got the sense that it was used, like it's that it's I don't want to more than a vision quest site, because a lot of hills or mountains would have been native Indian vision quest areas. But I think just when I was sort of looking at it, I got the sense of actually a lot of stones being up there at one point, like a lot of like standing stones being up there, and that it was yeah, I guess you'd almost call it like a. But again, this is just the feeling, right? Again, I can't prove that, but more like an ancient temple site.
I mean,
That's the feeling that I
that
got.
makes
That
that makes
rather than
perfect
being
sense.
like a pyramidal thing built, that they something about the hill itself had a particular energy, and they built on top of it whatever they used it for.
So right here, this is the Conestoga. This is the Conestoga River. If you're familiar with like the American like mythos of the Conestoga wagons and stuff like that,
Yeah.
well, it's because they were all made right here, and this is the river they're named after. Right here is where we have Big Indian and Little Indian Rock, which is
Nice.
the largest collection of petroglyphs east of the Mississippi known. And it's ignored. It's ignored by archaeologists. Like they know about it, but they're like, yeah, no big deal. You know, it's just friggin' Lancaster. Like nothing's going on right here, because all we care about, all we're told to look at are of the petroglyphs really of the Southwest.
Mm-hmm.
But when you put that in context of and I'm just like getting on like the the tip of the iceberg. Remember, like in the John Smith book, he just said that the Susquehannocks were. This is what we know about the Susquehannocks. They've been completely annihilated. There's no living descendants of the Susquehannocks. But we know that John Smith, that of the hundreds of tribes which are mentioned on the map, this is the only one. This one got the primary, like, looky here. This is who I'm talking about. This is where they lived. They were the most formidable warriors in the Northeast. They were mortal enemies with the Iroquois nation, or at least that's the history that we're told. And they were they were dominating. They dominated that strife. Now, if you think about it, they could live, if that is true, these people could live anywhere. They're the most dominating people, and they could live anywhere. And this is where they lived. They lived right in this area, right by the petroglyphs. The petroglyphs were very, very significant to Tlaquiel, who was who was an elder in the Toltec lineage. And this is the sweet spot. This is where they lived. And what I think, on a strategic location, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. I did a whole book which I called The Rights of the 40th Parallel, of what I sense is sacred sites, and it's all based upon right here. On this river, from this point, you are blind. From here, you can't see upstream. If anyone was coming downstream, and you would not see them until they made this turn. Likewise, if someone was going to come upriver, there's a blind spot here when you're at this location. Right here is known as Chickies Rock, and it's a very, very significant geological feature. But you can see upstream. And right here, this is Turkey Point. This is a very significant location as well. And all three of these have line of sight. They have line of sight. This is one of the cool things of looking at these locations in an area which has not been turned into a large city, because you still can have a better understanding of what the natural geography and landscape look like. And you can see, like, oh, from this point, and this point, I can have line of sight upstream, downstream with people. And my sense is this was a very, very sacred location. And it is further enhanced by the fact that, there's these petroglyphs. My guess is probably there's a ton of petroglyphs right in that same location by the St. Louis Fair. And one of the reasons why I was saying, like, St. Louis had to have been very significant, we know it because of the archway, and we know that it was sandwiched between Paris and London in terms of like this third site of the Olympic Games. So my sense is once we begin to start seeing a modus operandi, a certain way which these sites have been, how they're set up, and the clues, we can begin to identify them in other locations. Looking at
There's
the
something I'd recommend you go look for if you get out to a chance to be in the area, either with this place where you say the Northwest Trail thing is, or that
okay,
Turkey Point is. And that is my mother's, she lived in a fairly small town in Manitoba. But there was a river that went, a key river that went through the town, or sort of near the town.
okay,
And but similar to you, you had to get up to one of the hills to be able to have a proper sight line up and down this entire river. And while I was up there walking around, I found a stone that someone would say was just accident, was just, you know, natural, but I know it wasn't. It was carved into the shape of a seat. And combination of when I sit in that seat, A, I get a tremendous energy, but B, I see both ways completely down that river.
hmm.
So it's like literally like a lookout post was created so that somebody could comfortably watch the river. And I would be curious if you happen to check some of the higher locations in the, if there is something out there like that, where there's literally a rock formation has been somehow created to help the process of the watching of the river.
Uh, I'll definitely go look for that. One of the petroglyphs right down here is a human scale, human feet. And if you place your feet in the feet, you look directly upstream, like it's saying, look upstream. This was a very, very sacred and significant river. Before the Susquehannocks lived here, there was a mysterious group of people which were called the Shanks Ferry people. We know nothing about them, but the only things that we know, we're able to identify them because of their type of pottery. But then the second thing is, unlike any other people in this region, which include the Lenni Lenape, all of the Iroquois Nation,
Okay.
there are two things. One is that all of their locations were devoid of stockades. They had no protection around where they lived, which implies they lived in total harmony with
Right.
with everyone and nature. And the second
Right.
thing is they were consistent with how they buried their dead, with all heads facing the east, or the spines followed the line of the sun. And they lived here as well. So I find I find that very interesting. Um,
Mhm.
so okay, I mean, I think we're probably at like about 90 minutes right now. I'm thinking like now feels like kind of like we've covered a lot of stuff, and I don't want to go too much deeper. I want to give you an opportunity for any like final words or any thoughts or what you thought about this.
Well, it's partially interesting, you know, to see what we were going to uncover just by starting with a conversation of fairs and some Native Indian stuff and see where it would go. Because for me, for uncovering North America, I think whatever oral history is left in the native tribes themselves is where we would truly be able to know the history of North America. Um, you know, something like if someone like me or some of these other researchers are saying, hey, maybe like the Chicago World's Fair, the St. Louis World's Fair, these things weren't built, a lot of these buildings were in existence for hundreds or thousands of years, then the native culture should have some knowledge of that potentially. And again, I feel bad when I spent all the time with the medicine men that I learned from 20 years ago. I didn't have any knowledge of the subjects we're talking about now. I had a totally different mindset of what I was interested in. So I never asked. I never got a chance to ask any of them. Is there anything, is there any information of either an ancient civilization or a great civilization, or the other flip side of, were the native Indians the ones who had this civilization, and then whenever the war slash destruction happened, they were then forced into living, you might say, uh, the existence we think Native Indians lived their whole life, but maybe that's a fairly recent thing, that they only lived like that because they had to. And I mean, it's challenging because so many native of these medicine men I know, they were always very cautious with me being a white person. They sort of shared to where I thought I was, and they were always testing me to see Was I going to use what they told me in a good way or not, and to be able to slam the door down at any time to stop the teaching. So I get a sense that somewhere deep within some elders, they may know some of this, but could we as non-members of their tribe ever be able to find out what they know? I think it's a real important area if we could ever crack into that knowledge base.
I agree with you. And maybe I'll share with you on another time, like an experience which I have with there's a strong you don't think about South Central PA as having a strong Native American subculture, but there is. And so some of the stuff which I'd heard, um, it's my take, and this is a tricky place. I'll be the first one to admit this is tricky, and so you have to have a lot of discipline. Um, uh, the truth of the matter is we only have available what's available to us, and the quote unquote the window is closing from one time to another time. And this is just my view of how reality works, is that everything you need to know is in your own backyard. And particularly, like, as things are becoming more and more restrictive, the inverse in terms of looking at that is the stuff that's no longer in that you still have access to. It's even more significant. And so my sense is like, I don't want to say we make it up, but there's something about like having these sort of conversations, and like, my senses, my feeling is this, and this we know, and this we can see, and like beginning to go and test, like, all of the, to me, this, like, to your point in the very beginning, which was 1939 Poland. This is not just a mental exercise. This is to find something which can be applied in an actual way of human experience, which is in context with what is unfolding at this time. That's how I'm approaching all of this, and doing that in a way which is kind of fun. Like, I do think, like, this doesn't sound like a fun time, but like, perspective is everything.
Right. And like you just said, there are things right wherever you live right now that you can go and research, study, experience. People are saying, hey, I can't get on a plane and go to Egypt. I can't go to Mexico. I can't go to Peru. Yeah, but okay, what have you got 20 minutes from your house? What have you
Yeah.
got? What have you got that you could, you know, here where I live in Norway, I've come across maybe 100 stone circles, come across another 100, 200 standing stones, and the population who is interested in these topics don't know anything about them. It's just been wiped from they're wanting to spend time fly to England to see them, and it's like, but just down the road you got 10 of them right there.
Yeah.
And so it's this, I think, yeah, using this time now to inverse, to say, okay, what have I got where I am right now that I can use either energetically or as a focal point for whatever it is you want to study.
Yeah. Yeah. What, like, that's, I mean, to me, that has always been like the clear demarcation of like the control system. Like, when you're told something, like, which is outside of like your capability, or you have to use their system in order to do it, well, then it's, I can't go to the Great Wall of China. I can't experience that. Well, guess what? I'm not supposed to. They just sold me that story. They sold me the story of, like, if you have the ability to go to Egypt, that's a different thing. But if you don't, well, then don't go to Egypt. Don't worry about it. If that's going to unfold, that's going to unfold, because there's so much right in our backyards.
Yep.
And that's the stuff that's hidden, the stuff you're not supposed to look at. Like, you live in Rockford, Illinois, and you're like, wow, you're not supposed to think that there's something there. So.
Yeah, so it's an opportunity. If that's one thing, if someone takes out of this our whole conversation, is just open your eyes a little bit as you walk around, as you go out in your area, your community. What do you notice that you didn't maybe pay attention to before? Maybe it's a building, maybe it's a mound, maybe it's a stone, maybe it's the way the river's set up, maybe it's Who knows? But you may have something sitting right there that's extremely interesting, is extremely, not only maybe worth studying, but actually has a power or an energy or an ability to have balance or healing or knowledge right at that place.
Mhm.
I'll give you one last example before, so we don't keep talking for a long period of time. But there's a gentleman I know, um, a shaman from Scotland, and he got very, very ill. His story is wonderful to me. He got real, I mean, sick to the point that he couldn't walk. He could barely move. But something about a tree, about 3 or 4 blocks away, told him that he needed to go to the tree, and he would literally drag himself down the road almost to this tree. It took him hours or something at the beginning, and he would sit under this yew tree day after day after day after day. And finally, after 6 or 8 months of this, the tree started talking to him, and the tree started teaching him, and the tree started healing him. And after doing this for about 2 or 3 years, he gained his healing and his knowledge of how to work with people. But it was a combination of his own sacrifice, his own willing to get through it, and the fact that he didn't have to go a long distance to find what he needed. It was right there. He just had to be open enough to see what it was.
Yeah, I love that story. That's a fan,
Yeah.
and the patience. You know, I would say that's the thing. Like what we are, what we, what has happened to the current consciousness of the moment is we've lost the patience and like the patience and the subtlety. And so, like, you know, that's when you hear the stories of, like, you know, you said he was there for weeks or months, and then something happened and there's a shift. Like, you know, that's a nice reminder.
So maybe that's a good point to leave this conversation at.
I would agree. I concur. Howdy,
Perfect.
this was a lot of fun. I hope that this was enjoyable for our viewers, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, let's see what kind of comments we get from this and what kind of ideas they might give us to go on another search.
All right, I'm going to stop recording now, and then you and I can talk for a moment afterwards,
Sure.
off camera.
Yep.
Okay. See ya, everybody. This is Mike. This is Howdy.
Cheers.